Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for stopping by today. I'm Brenda Littleton, your host for Life After a Narcissist, where I post information to help you recover from a toxic relationship and then launch your best, most valuable, highest form of life possible. And today I have a guest joining us, someone that I trust and rely on, not only for myself, but for my other clients as well, to help create a path of health and balance. And I'm so happy and pleased to introduce to you Dr. Natasha Nelson, who is a high performance educator, a specialist who integrates somatic and emotional health into business, sports, and personal life. Her mission is to help individuals achieve their goals without compromising their health. So that is where we are today, and looking at how we can undo the compromises that we have installed in our health. So Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for being here today. I know you're busy, but I really appreciate our time together.
Oh my goodness, Brenda. Wow. Thank you for a beautiful introduction. And really, thank you for inviting me to be here with you and trusting me with the people that you serve, and how my information and expertise and what I have to offer. I'm grateful that you trust that it will be of service for the people that you connect with too. So thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Your work is valuable, and I'm thrilled that we can have a few moments here today captured and share with others. So I'm just going to start off with some basic questions for you, and then we'll get into how your work serves the population of life after a narcissist. So can you share how you came into the field of somatic healing? And, you've been at it for a long time. How did you become an expert?
So, great. So, well, I'm a chiropractor by trade, and been a chiropractor 26 years now. And, I realized early on, within the first months of my practice, that not everybody was healing the same way. And school taught me to be a great diagnostician and x-ray and all that kind of stuff. But people, even with the same injuries or the same issues, didn't heal the same. And it started me questioning why, like what's different. And that's where I was able to just start. I didn't even know I was doing it, but I would ask patients about what was going on in their life, what they were stressed about, what was happening. And I started to see patterns in the body about where stress would show up, and started to go, wow, that's interesting. Like certain issues, certain emotions, certain stressors show up in certain parts of the body. And then I started to get to the place where I'm like, well, I don't know what to do with it once I understood it. So then I went back to school and got a master's in spiritual psychology, because I really wanted to understand how the mind and our beliefs and our thoughts and our feelings translate into how it relates in the body physically, how it alters the body. And then it was like it all came together of like, oh my gosh, as a chiropractor, that's all I study is really, I mean, you study everything, but everything I practice is the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. And being able to understand and tie that in, I'm like, I knew it intuitively, I just didn't have the tools. So that's been my journey of how I became an expert, and then really honing in those skills as a coach and teaching workshops and working with people to really dive into the mind and the beliefs and the thoughts of what's happening in the circumstances of their life, or going back a decade or 20 or 30 to understanding where the misinterpretation happened that has lodged itself in the physical body, and
Gotcha.
then being able to tie those together. So that's my long answer to your question.
Great. It's very reminiscent of Gabor Mate's work too, who I studied with when somatic work, and how the body doesn't lie. Our body is a repository of all of our repressed and expressed feelings and trauma. Um, So what is somatic healing and how does it relate to my population of narcissistic recovery? So, that we all have stress from day to day life, but then when we subject ourselves or we find ourselves identifying that we have toxic relationships really close in our proximity, many people are still in those relationships or they're moving out of relationships and their body is feeling the sense of grief, toxicity, plugged up, and my work with clients is based on how to articulate, how to name it, and where does it reside. So, what is your work? How does your work tie in with something like this?
Yeah. So for me, when I think about somatic healing, soma meaning the body,
Right.
and being able to heal the body, my approach really comes from that place of being able to feel into the body and feel the feelings that have stored in the body in order to allow the energy of, well, emotions is energy in motion, and allowing that to move through and out. And really that came from the place of once I started to understand how much our memory is held, people think of the mind has our memories. I'm like, yeah, but your body has the memories because there's a chemical change in the body, in the muscles. And it shows up, even if it's like you may not feel it, but it's like muscles will be tight or joints don't move through their full range. And, through the spine, when the muscles are tight, they affect the nervous system to every organ and tissue and cell in the body. So think about, our nerves are so sensitive that we can even feel like, if we have a hair on our arm, we can feel it. Like it doesn't take a lot of weight or pressure, but it's so sensitive. Well, the nervous system is like that too. So if you have a muscle that's just a little bit tight or a little bit irritated or inflamed, it will alter the connection of the mind and the body and the system and the organ that it talks to. And so my work is about how to identify and recognize the points in the body that are tight, and then how to breathe through and allowing the emotions to come up and out. And oftentimes, when you think about when you get out of a toxic relationship, you don't realize how much you've closed and shut your emotions down and your body down in order to survive. And, I grew up in a very chaotic home. My father was alcoholic and very physically abusive, emotionally, mentally abusive to my mom and I. And so I watched my mom, and I grew up learning how to hear my dad's steps and his voice and the smell of alcohol so that I would know how to respond. And, as I started to really learn and go through that and recognize that in myself, I realized, oh my gosh, my body would tighten up. And though he longed past, and I've done a lot of the work for that for myself, some of the lingering work that I had to do was there would be a smell that would trigger my body. So alcohol was one of them, but not the only one. But so things like smells or things like what you see, like it can seem like it's not a big deal, but your body will remember those times of chaos when you had to shut down. And they can get re-triggered by, like I said, smells or words or sights or things that you hear, songs. Oh my gosh, songs were a big deal because my dad loved music, and there's certain things he would listen to when he was drinking. And so a song could come on the radio and it would recreate the entire nervous system as if I was 5 and 7 years old. And so when you're getting out of a toxic relationship, there's the physical removal of yourself for health, and your safety. And then there's the time that needs to go through so that you're healing the emotional part that is contained in your physical body, and being able to release that so that you're not unconsciously on edge every single time something comes around in your senses that triggers those memories up again.
Yeah, it's like the constant dumping of adrenaline, that, you know, having that, never being at peace, always being in that fight, flight, or fawning, or fibbing mentality. So in practical terms, as far as somatic symptoms, to say the symptomology, I don't like pathologizing emotional, but it is in the body. You know, I'm aware of when I work with clients, they'll give me a litany of symptoms that they don't affiliate, associate, or even think come from emotional situations, such as irritable bowel syndrome, clenching their TMJ, headaches. And one time I heard you speak about the neck, the computer neck, but it's still the sense of your shoulders are up under your ears. You know, you're kind of like walking around protected. And I worked in domestic violence. I even worked with a huge population of picking and cutting. You know, these are all compensations, looking for ways to, as Gabor Mate talks about, a cry for love in our addictions. And basically, psychobiotically, it's doing behavior that allows the dumping of oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitters. So if I come to you and let's just say, to give our audience an idea, and I'm coming out of a toxic abuse situation, it could be my spouse, it could be a work related, and I'm a mess and nervously. So my nervous system is on hypervigilant, and I'm not digesting, not sleeping. My best self is somewhere else. Like, how would you deal? Like, can you give me an example of what a client would go through with you? Like, would they commit to working with you for a while, or how would you suggest moving forward?
Yeah, it does take time to do the healing and releasing and creating new neural pathways. And so that so that we don't become not trying to get the high, the dopamine high. And there's a reframing, and there's time. So it does take time to do that. One of one of my favorite healing modalities, is, yes, people who work with me, if they're physically available, there's hands on the spine, because it does show where the tension is carried. But even working virtually, it's being able to see, like, I can see where people most people carry their stress in one of two places, either through the neck, and it causes headaches. And you mentioned irritable bowel, but it's all the digestive issues. Those are the top two of the symptoms that physically show up when emotions are dysregulated over time. It's going to be digestive issues, headaches, like neck pain and headaches. So there's the figuring out which emotion goes and what's showing up. But one of my favorite activities is how to find that your best self, your authentic self. And sometimes it can feel hard to do that. And so I always say, let's start with a coloring book of human anatomy. It's one of my favorite go-tos, because the human anatomy allows the visual to actually see what the body is supposed to look like and what it looks like on the inside. And for the mind to have something to focus on and to see what it looks like in its healthy state.
Okay.
And then being able to breathe through, like, as you're coloring, breathing into the part that you feel like you don't have to go in particular order. You can start with an arm, and you feel like, oh, I just want to color the muscles of my arm. Well, as you breathe in that, by squeezing your hand and relaxing it, like holding it for 3 seconds and relaxing it, the force of the contraction and then relax allows the blood flow, oxygen flow, but allows the relaxation to happen. So as you do that, and when you're looking at the muscles and you're coloring them, it allows the feelings and the energy of emotions to already start to move. And then as you're coloring and you're breathing into the hand and the coloring, it's releasing it out.
Wow.
And for those who want to be able to, if you're feeling unable to really get into the root, like a little bit deeper into the emotion, is to color with your non-dominant hand, because
That's a
then
good.
it bypasses your thinking logical part, and it'll come up as soon as you take the crayon or coloring pencil. Something emotionally will come up that you can breathe in and breathe out and exhale. And if you do that in all the parts in the body while you're coloring and learning, you're integrating from the anatomy coloring book what a healthy system and organs and cells look like. What does healthy tissue look like? What does a healthy joint look like? And then the movement allows you to feel and connect to the muscles in your body and the parts of your body that have been shut down or locked down or numb from different coping mechanisms that you've adopted over time. That it allows you to reconnect with it. And then breathing it out is these part of the emotional release. So one of my favorites, because, you know, even though you don't need me to do that, I'm obviously always here to support, but I like to give things for people too, to just, where can they start on their own? And then when it becomes too emotionally tough, then that's where I come in and, okay, like we got to breathe through it. We got to get the movement. We got to do the deeper healing work to really break through the emotional part in a supportive way to release it out.
That's beautiful. I love the sense of safety that you create and childlike approach, coloring, and yet also giving a client a modeling example of a healthy body, probably in ways that we've never looked at our bodies, to just take into consideration that language and to give ourselves permission to accept where our bodies are in our home environment, in the stress environment, knowing that we are committed and have fidelity to our act of healing. And also your comment of when you're feeling, I mean, in my language, it's you have to feel it to heal it. And the first thing we learn in our culture is our feelings aren't valid. And so we are taught to intellectualize. And so we're always mentally working it. And yet when we are in the mind, we don't feel. And coming in back into the breath, being in the body, the first thing that comes up when we're not thinking is feelings. And there's a sense of, oh, I got to get rid of that. But your practice here, the beginning entree into working through emotions and somatic release, it feels very kind and very gentle and yet really effective.
Yes. You know, there is an element, because there is an intellectual, like the mind likes to know stuff.
Yeah.
And I like to know stuff, I like to teach stuff. And one of the things I like to do is recognize that our body talks to us. Our body is always talking to us. That once we start to understand the language that our body is using to get our attention, it's not about, make the pain go away and hurry up and stuff it down and disconnecting from ourselves physically, but it's welcoming the messages that our body has to share. And so when we welcome them, intellectually, we can say, okay, I'll welcome them. And what it does is it allows us to appreciate what our body does. We can appreciate how it functions. It also allows us to appreciate how we coped and how we survived. And so what that does, it allows us to appreciate what our body has done for us, so that as we're healing, we don't feel bad and ashamed of what we have done to cope and survive. And that's the first part that allows our body to say, okay, well, if we're safe enough and we're not going to feel ashamed for how we survived, then we can start to heal with love and gratitude for what our body experienced, what we had to go through, and it softens it. So we're not so mean to ourselves in this process.
Beautiful.
And really just connecting with the language and the body as a communicator. So there's an intellectual, but there's the feeling, and you put them both in there, and it's just like, they will float back and forth, and they're both in there. And it's like you don't have to choose one or the other. You can kind of float between both, whatever comes up.
I love that. It's what I call it, the balance of ego and soul. The ego being the daily consciousness of our operating system and figuring out how we're going to make it through. And then the soul is the long picture, but it's also the energy of continued health and life and perpetuity of our higher, creating the life of our highest being and
Yeah.
being. So
Yeah.
in closing, do you have any takeaways for the audience on if they're just beginning their inquiry, if they have a longing to change their behaviors or move towards health, but yet they're still unsure of why or how can they be free? Any parting comments, and also how can people find you?
Yeah. So first, I want to acknowledge every single person who's willing to say yes to the journey of the healing process. It can, some of the cells, you get new cells like tomorrow. So there are times where things can heal and feel that fast. And there are times where the healing takes a little bit longer. So it's the journey, but I acknowledge everybody who's taken those steps. I think one of the first takeaways, I think, is really for people to look at their body, feel their body, and not be mad at their body for where they're at.
It makes me cry.
And me too. It's like, it makes me emotional because it's like for people, if you've been going through so much, your body hurts, or your body can feel shut down, or your body just feels so tired, and you don't have to do everything at once. But the life force that is in every single cell is in every cell. And you start with one cell at a time that can change within a day. And so when you just start to go, okay, I've been through a lot, and it can heal also. So starting there is that first, to just love yourself and your body and for what it's done, and appreciate it, and that you're still here and you're still alive. So you made it this far.
Thank you. Great.
And so people can find me, like my website is www.lifedoctor, doctor spelled out, .guru, Guru. You can find me at Dr. Nelson at lifedoctor.guru. You can email me there.
I will
Yes.
post this information with the recording as well. So
Yeah, so that's the easiest and fastest way is just directly reach out to me.
well, would you be willing to come back and do some more recordings and later on and look at other parts of healing within somatic release and talk about some of, I know you have a program starting soon, all that stuff. It's all
Yeah, I would love to come back, Brenda. I feel like there's so much, it brings me so much joy to share the information. There's so much to share about somatic healing and health, and, offering people information that makes sense is one of the things that I feel like is a gift that I have. It's like one of the things I do well, things that make sense, how to use it. And I'm also very practical in some ways, to just be like, oh, this is doable. Here's a small action step. Here's how to use it. So I would love to come back and talk about everything from physical, manifestations to the emotions of how to release them. I would come back and talk about anything that your clients and people want to know more about.
Thank you so much for your time, for coming in, for providing insight to the beginning journey. And I know I'd love to interview you again and talk about the other aspects that you excel in and hear about your programs. And I know you provide nutritional counseling as well for recovery and working with cancer patients as well as other duress and stressful situations in life. So I want to thank you for serving your community and thank you for your work. It's just wonderful to have you here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, bye.